We'll start the afternoon session now, and contrary to what's on the screen at the moment, we're actually going to start with Adam and then carry on with Geoff. So this is back to the original order. So Adam's going to talk to us about some work that he's been looking at on community consultation on consensus measurement. We've addressed this before, or attempted to address this before, and so Adam's going to give us some background and see if we get some thoughts and ideas from you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Adam Gosling from APNIC Secretariat again. One of my tasks here is to talk long enough for Geoff to get back from his lightning talk. Okay, we're off. Consensus measurement. What is consensus measurement? If you look at the APNIC SIG guidelines under 1.7, what's consensus? Consensus is achieved when everyone consents to the decision of the group. The decision may not be everyone's first preference, but it's acceptable to all participants. In the same document, the basic steps in the consensus decision-making process, the chair may ask for a show of hands, and we've been doing that today. Those for and against, and we've actually elaborated a bit more on that, and those who have no opinion. And so we've all been through this today. For any in the room who aren't familiar, it is not a vote. It's a way of broadly gauging opinion. So let's talk about the show of hands. It's actually a way for the chair to say, stop doing your emails. Because, I mean, it's a light-hearted way to say it, but it is.
Can we get the access point turned off? That's the only way it's going.
Because everyone is quite often sitting there behind their laptops, and the chair needs to know that you actually are engaged. And so asking you to put up your hand and the kind of meeting stops, and I think some people go, oh, are we doing it now? So I think that is a kind of an important part of it, even though it's not a vote, right? Another thing about it is the question is not always the same. Today we've had a couple of examples where the question has been the same. We've got this proposal, do you strongly oppose or support? Sometimes when the proposals are more complex, the questions get more complex, and those who have been to other policy SIG meetings will know that the chairs might say, okay, look, I'm not getting the feel that the room is very supportive of this. If we took X factor out, would you be supportive of the proposal then? Or if we changed it, tweaked it in this way, would you be supportive? And it's a way to kind of guide the discussion and get a feel for how we may achieve consensus. And it's important for that as well. So it's not the kind of final point in the process. You may use it over and over again, as Masato did earlier today, to say, okay, well, if you're objecting to this, you better kind of own up to it, and we really need to hear why, because just passively objecting doesn't really contribute or take away from the consensus. There's also a matter about the policy SIG mailing list, so these, when a proposal goes up, there's quite often a flurry of discussion, comments about the proposal, and sometimes people will come straight out and say, I support it. And then you may not hear or see from them again. They may not come to the meeting, so they may not participate because they've expressed their support. And so I put in the PDP step there. Consensus must be reached first at the SIG session and afterwards at the member meeting. That's out of the policy development process policy. And so that's what we're trying to kind of achieve. That's the point we're getting to. Oh, and that's the other thing. Sometimes we'll have a completely new draft at the meeting. I mean, this is kind of, you know, the way we approach policy development is pretty ad hoc at sometimes. And because after the chair might have identified that there's a particular part of the proposal that's causing a problem, and that people are generally pretty happy with most of the problem, but if you just change that, so we need to put up another draft, and so the author will go away, scamper away and make some edits, and then it's posted back to the list. And then we reach consensus on that, and sometimes we'll show it on screen. It's all kind of, as I say, it's kind of a little bit ad hoc. But, so why do we need a different way of measuring it? And I guess, well, I haven't explained what I'm talking about yet. What we've talked about in the past is there a way to do this other than a physical show of hands? Why would we look at another way? And I'm thinking of something electronic, right? We use the Jabber chat at the moment. It's got some problems. One of the problems is that it's often manned by secretariat staff, and we had a situation, I think it might have been in Xi'an, or it might have been the meeting before, where a staff member was on chat and someone said, I support this proposal at the call for consensus. And so the person put up their hand. And of course, community members kind of went, your secretariat staff, why are you joining in the consensus here? And so they were trying to express what they were seeing in the chat room. Similarly, GGM earlier said, I've got 2 for and 1 against, I think it was. It's not a vote, we don't count. How can he relay to the chairs that I'm seeing some support, but not full support? It's kind of got to be a better way to do this, right? Another reason we need this is because my boss is here. And if I say this is a good idea, he thinks it's a bad idea, I'm going to cop it when I get back. And that's a valid reason, right? We represent the community here, and we do it as individuals, not as part of the corporate machine. And so there's probably more to it than this. There's some cultural factors that you need to take into account. Some people are, they don't like to put up their hand and say they oppose something, because it's not culturally acceptable to them, but they should still have a way to express that support or opposition that they're comfortable with, right? Probably the most important thing is participation, and the cornerstone of what we do here is community representation, and not everyone can afford to get on a jet, come and stay in a fancy hotel and participate. And we have the mailing list and we have the chat. Can we develop on that? And we're very much continuous improvement at the Secretariat, and so this is about continuous improvement. We need to get more people included in this process, and this is a way that we can actually do it maybe a little bit more smoothly, sleek, shall I say. Looking back, APNIC Secretariat, or APNIC, the organisation, used to support remote hubs, and the way we used to do it was whoever was going to be the next host, we would send a trainer and maybe a couple of other people along, and they would have a little mini APNIC meeting, and those people would video conference into the policy SIG, and they would sit there and put up their hands, and we'd have a video camera facing them, and the chairs would kind of squint at the screen and try and see whether there was consensus there or not. And yeah, well, it didn't always work well, and sometimes the links dropped out, and it actually probably caused more confusion than anything. But for a variety of reasons, APNIC stopped doing this after APNIC 34. There's still a little bit of residual demand for it, though. People do want to get together in a room in Sydney and talk about the policy proposals and participate in the consensus. I kind of talked about the Adobe Connect chat there. I don't need to go on that again. We get these remote hubs, and Sunny before the meeting said we need to be very clear about this. It's something. So I think Sunny's answer when people say, "Can we have a remote hub?" is, "Yeah, that's where the web feed is. Go knock yourself out." And it's not so much whether they sit in a room and watch the webcast, because they're quite welcome to do that. It's about whether they can participate actively in the consensus process, and that decision is kind of up to the chair of the day. whether they're willing to do that. And I've spoken to the chairs this week, and we've spoken before about it, of course, and the chairs are currently happy to do that, and the only way to do that is through the chat. Specifically though here, I talked to the chairs about, do we take consensus from individuals, or that if it's a remote hub with a group of people, they're not reaching consensus there and we're reaching consensus here, and you add them together. It's one community, and whether people are sitting in their pajamas in their lounge room and doing this, or sitting in the office, or sitting with a group of people in New Delhi doing it, these we're all individuals contributing to the one consensus, or lack of consensus. Participation, of course. So the objective of APNIC as an organisation is participation. We've got to, if we're going to make good policy, we've got to get as many inputs as we can into this process, and it's not always affordable for people to travel. And it should be easy for them, right? So we had a go at this in New Delhi, and this was something a little, with my minimalist web skills hacked up on our content management system, and we asked people whether they would support using an electronic means of gauging consensus. And I couldn't actually get rid of the percentage things, and there's some questions, you know, well, is this a vote or not? It was pretty strong support, right? The worst, there were a fairly big chunk of people who were neutral about it. There wasn't many people who had strong objections. So that was actually 2 years ago, right? I'm a bit embarrassed to say. The Secretariat looked into this and one, so there are these things called audience response systems. And so we actually got a quote from an organisation that does this, and they give you a little clicker, and as you come in the door, you go, here's your clicker, like a remote control, and you go, yes, no. And they also, this quote that we got, they also have smartphone apps, and you can do it in a browser. It's a proprietary system. There's CapEx and there's OpEx there. And the Secretariat is kind of willing to put the money in. It's a substantial amount of money. And part of it is OpEx. There's an ongoing license fee. Now, that was a commercial system. It had kind of bells and whistles. I personally, and now we're talking about Adam here, as you can say, Adam's proposal, I'm personally not overly supportive of that. I think there may be other solutions that are cheaper or free, that we could use to do this part of the consensus process. It depends, and whether I'm right in that assessment depends on what you expect out of the system. So the idea itself has support. We think it's, the Secretariat staff think it's a good idea. We've seen the other part of APNIC, which is the community, in the slide from New Delhi, we have pretty strong support there. The Secretariat is willing to spend the money if necessary. This is important. This has been on my quarterly objectives for 2 years. So, I'm pushing forward with it, right? I don't have sanction for this proposal from my manager. I don't have it from the policy chairs. I intend it to generate discussion here today because based on that discussion, I'm going to move forward or stop. It either gets done or gets taken off my quarterly objectives. So what I'm proposing is I'm going to put up the specifications for a consensus measurement system, and I don't know whether we have to buy one, build one, or whatever. I'm trying to get some idea of what's acceptable and what you expect out of that system, and I'll take your feedback, tweak my next slide, and put this on the mailing list for further comment. And then I think the way forward, apart from getting approval from the management of the Secretariat, is it's probably up to the chairs. They're the people who have to use it, right? So this is what I'm proposing we use to measure consensus at APNIC Policy SIG. It'll have iOS and Android apps plus a web browser. No little remote control thing. You don't get any toys. It will replace the show of hands when we call for consensus. It will not replace voting for the election chairs. The SIG guidelines say voting will take place by a count of a show of hands. So I propose we don't use it for this. It's specifically in the guidelines. We would have to change the guidelines, I personally think, in order to use it. I don't think we need to do that. We vote on chairs every couple of years. It's not a big issue. You will need to register. You will require a name, which could be Daffy Duck, and a verifiable email address, which could be a free email address. The registration will be immediate. If you're sitting at home in your pajamas and you forgot to register, you'll be able to do it and it'll be virtually instantaneous, and so you'll be able to participate in the call for consensus. You'll be able to voice your opinion before the SIG meeting. What I mean by this is, once we put a policy proposal to the mailing list, we'll also put up, do you agree or not? So for those people who read the email once, they can go, I'm going to click on this and I'm going to say it's a great idea or it's a bad idea, and then they can walk away and not participate for the rest of the process. There will be no audit trail. None. Nothing. If you come to me and say, I don't believe that that was consensus, I'm going to go, The results will be available only to the chairs. The chairs will decide whether it's a valid outcome. And then I'm going to delete it. If you're with 10 people in a room in Sydney, you're going to have to do this individually. There's no group submissions, regardless of where you are. Thank you. Comments? I'm more than happy to take comments.
So I think there'll be some comments, and I think at some point, as well as asking you for comments, I know I have some comments that I think I want to make, and perhaps Masato does as well, because I think this one really affects how we do our job rather than what the policies are. So I think it's okay for the chairs to have an opinion on this, but I'd love to hear from the rest of you.
David Farmer, Aaron AC, and the University of Minnesota. One issue I don't think you covered is, can you change your vote? Because if you vote ahead of time saying, or not, if you raise your hand to vote, if you signify one thing or the other, and then hear the discussion and change your mind, that needs to be accounted for.
I think that's a good idea. I'd be happy to add that to the specification. I'll be happy to add anything to the specification or take anything off. I mean, I'm not the one who's making the decision here.
As long as it gets off your quarterly.
Yeah.
The impairments and internet indeed. Wow, issues. Okay. Is it your intention for someone to be able to participate in the entire policy development process anonymously? That seems to be what this allows.
That's what this allows. Do you think that this is an important thing?
I think it would be, I think it's something that the community needs to make an informed decision about. Well, if I turn it this way, it feeds back.
Well, stand in front of it.
He's trying to ask me a question.
See you later, Adam.
Yeah.
Adam, do you think, I think, I know Adam's over there, I'm making a point.
You do realise if you turn it around the other way, all those people see your back, so we can cope with it.
So, at the moment, even though you could sign up on the mailing list with Daffy Duck and have it, pretty much the consensus that the chairs are drawing from is attributed consensus. People are putting their hand up in the room or on the chat. you can pretty much tell, and you have to be attributable in order to be involved in this process. You don't need to be a member, but you do. The proposer gets to see who agrees and who disagrees. And as the proposer of a number of policies, I think that's actually important. You know, if I'm proposing a policy and it's getting agreement from this sort of sector, but not agreement from this sector here, that's actually really useful information for me. If it's one economy or a group of economies who aren't agreeing with this, I absolutely need to know that. So if all that comes out of this is, yeah, no, a whole bunch of anonymous malware on the net disagreed with you and your proposal doesn't pass, sorry, I'm not into that. So if it's an app and you need to register, but you can register with Daffy Duck and a Gmail address, I'm not entirely sure that it's as valid a consensus as we have now. I'll think about some other stuff later.
Brajesh Jain here. I just wanted to understand that if the opinion before SIG meeting reaches decision or conclusion that A is the preferred one, and after coming here and meeting community people and hearing the dialogue and discussions, and some opinion comes, and as Dean's told that different conclusion comes here that B is the better option. So what it will be? A, B, or?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. If we allowed people to show their support or opposition from the time that the proposal was first mailed, and then we came to the meeting and there was a significantly different discussion that happened, those people may be watching TV at the time, and it comes to the question about whether they can change their vote. Well, they might not even be watching anymore, and so how do the chairs accommodate that? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Let me make sure on point. I think, in my understanding, this system only opens at the end of the discussion in the session, right?
No. You will be able to voice your opinion before the SIG meeting, kind of in the middle of the screen.
I think it can be done by chairs. I think we don't need to open before the session.
Anything can be done. You're saying you're expressing a preference for it to be done at a certain time.
I'm expressing my preference.
Let's let the people who are standing at the mic express their views, Masato, and then we can make some comments, I think, after we hear various things.
David Conrad, Virtualized. I actually think this is just crazy talk. I mean, actually going into the 21st century and technology. No. We need to go back to the 18th century. No, I think this is a lovely idea. I guess the questions that have not, I don't think, been answered is the cost implication. How much is it going to cost to develop? Because if the cost is relatively low, then my God, go forward and just experiment, see how it works. It's not like it changes a significant aspect of the decision making, because it's still driven by the chairs who gauge the consensus. And experiment, try different things, try anonymous, non-anonymous, and just see how it works. But that depends. If it's $5 to develop, then hey, knock yourself out. If it's 5 million, maybe you have to think a bit more.
I guess the first quote we got, which probably wouldn't be the final quote, for the proprietary system that could do all of that, but it could also do all of the opposite to that, was in the region of 8,000 to 10,000 Australian dollars. There was a substantial ongoing license fee, but certainly not that much. That included getting a little remote. So I think to put a guesstimate on it, let's say it's going to cost us $5,000 a year in software licensing, which is a lot of money to some people. But we also thought we can use this in the training to kind of justify the cost a little bit. But it's not 5 million, but it's more than 5.
Narani Nimpuno, NetNode. I'm sorry, I didn't think I was going to speak as much in these sessions, but I clearly can't help myself. I guess my comments are not as much from an APNIC member perspective, although we're APNIC members, but maybe as someone who was policy manager at the RIPE NCC and then has followed the discussions in, I guess, all 3 regions. And Adam, I feel for you. I understand what you're trying to solve. I think what makes it so hard is because consensus is hard. It's not the measurement that is hard, really. And Lynn Sanamur, who was the CEO and president of ISOC, she described consensus as, consensus is when you come to a point where all reasonable objections have been addressed. And I think that's what is the challenge in these policy discussions, not knowing how many are for or against it. A little bit what Dean was saying, I find it useful if I put up a proposal and I see that Dean doesn't agree with me. Not because I'll blacklist him, but because then I'll go to him and I'll say, what are your objections? And Dean might actually have a point. And I think that is what makes good policy. Because none of us have clear, solutions from the start. A lot of the proposals are sort of, you put something together and then throughout this process, when you get feedback, you don't perfect the proposals, but it turns into something better at the end. And I think that process is really important. And the other thing is also, what this doesn't solve is, so there was a proposal earlier and my colleague went up and said, well, I think we should add this language as well. And some people might have had a problem with the proposal before, and then with that added language, you think, oh yes, that makes it absolutely clear what this can be used for. So I think those are challenges you have. And I'm sorry, I don't have any solution or any good answers for you. I only have difficult questions. So while a system like this will help you see, okay, we have so many people for and so many people against, so these people changed along the way, it doesn't necessarily create good policy. And I think that is the challenge here. Not just understanding consensus or measuring consensus, because consensus is a process as well, but then crafting good policy.
That's great, thank you. I just point out, actually, I don't see this being about measuring consensus. We kind of do that already. I see this about enabling participation. And I'm not taking away from what you said. I think creating good policy is the outcome, and engaging consensus is not necessarily the means to that end. But I would also kind of remind about my comments about the cultural issues. If Dean doesn't like it, he doesn't necessarily want me coming over and go, why didn't you like it? That's not necessarily a good outcome either. But I think what you've said there is really important. Our objective is to make good policy.
Yeah, and I know that the cultural issues are, I think this is actually a very Western way of doing things, and I think we need to be very aware of that and critical of that. I don't think this is the only way. But the other thing that concerns me a little bit is that it's a lot easier to just say, no, I don't like that, without being constructive. Here, you're in the room, and I say, okay, Dean, so you don't like it. Well, you go and solve it, though, or you go and add that text then. Or you're clearly interested, so why don't we work together? And I think that is also something very valuable in the process that we have now. I agree it's not a perfect process and a lot can be improved, but yeah, like I said, I only have difficult questions.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, this is the point of this presentation. I also don't think that having a system that counts hands of any manner changes what we do here. We still should come to the room and discuss it in order to make good policy.
This is Izumi speaking as an individual, and actually Nurani and also Adam actually explained most of the points that I really wanted to share. So one point I'm a little bit concerned about is, well, okay, maybe start with agreeing with Adam. So I do agree that, a lot of people participating from Asia, it's like a little bit uncomfortable to have to show hands and then express yourselves. And then I also like the idea of wider participation, so it would help the people who are not able to physically come to the meeting, and and they can not just make comments but be involved in the process. I think I like this part of the concept, but at the same time, I think some people can just make up their mind at the beginning. I don't like this proposal, or well, maybe reverse support as well, and then not listen to the discussion, and then just use it as a voting system. So. So if we want to address the fact that we want more participation remotely and the people who are shy to speak, instead of maybe having systematic votes, think of some other ways that we can perhaps engage. So in terms of looking at remote participation, I don't know how widely, in terms of the areas we can cover, maybe we can have remote cameras that we had for some of the venues and look at the show of hands. Well, I also understand maybe there are limitations in the number of venues that we can show, so how do we do that? Or maybe people can chat and say, yes, I agree, or things like that. But then also make sure you state the reason why, or maybe we can think of some alternative ways to address the issue that you have raised, which I agree, and then the possible implications it might have on the way you have proposed.
Excellent, thank you.
Rajesh Charya, President ISPI. While I support the technology, what you are going to use with the replacement of your classical way of by showing of hand, but as suggestions made by Dean and the other fellows, for changing my vote after hearing to the other fellow, I can change my mind. How can I change my vote? That should be incorporated into the technology. My other issue is, when we are using this show of hand, what is the logic behind for not using this process for the election of the chair? Because the SIG guidelines 2.6.3 says that the voting of the SIG chair will take place by the count of show of hands. Okay, but many people are not able to come, but they want to participate into the election of the chair. So what is the logic behind for not adding this?
It would require a change to the SIG guidelines, a documentation change, which would require consensus. So I'm objective here, but that's the reason. It actually says there will be a count of show of hands. It's a literal thing. If we did not elect people that way, we would have to change that document. And so that requires not me, but a member of the community to come and say, I have a proposal to change the guidelines. I would like to change them in this way.
My suggestion will be, why not include this also? Because a lot of people who wants to be into the remotely, but they are not able to participate due to travel or any other issues. I think that we should thinking of changing the guidelines and making this. Yeah.
Actually, we are not thinking current chair election system is good. It's not best. We are thinking so. Okay. Then problem is, since it is election voting, so number is very important. It's totally different from consensus. Then if we will introduce this system to election chair election, by now we may see a problem about how can I say, integrity. So in voting, everybody should have only one voting. Right now, it says so, right? You should not raise your vote.
No, I'm not saying so. Why I'm saying?
Then if we will introduce electric system in the voting, we should authorize each participant. But
You can't.
We think right now it's very difficult. So we have not yet reached good idea how we can resolve this issue. So that's why we are trying to introduce this system in consensus as first step.
So if you look at some of my things here, you would require your real name and a verifiable email address, and we would have to check that you weren't a botnet. you wouldn't, so there would need to be an audit trail. The system, the results would need to be available to everyone on the community, in the community. So it would be a different specification, basically, is what Masato is saying. At the moment, this is a very simple system.
I think absolutely this is a topic that we can discuss, but I think I don't want to talk about it now because it's going to take us off the track of this one.
No
yeah?
problem. No problem.
So absolutely happy for us to have a discussion about that at some other point, but can we just stick on this one because we've probably got enough to...
No, definitely.
Yeah.
Because I was talking for the unrepresented people who are not
absolutely.
able to...
Absolutely.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. George, you've got a comment, and then perhaps...
So this is David Woodgate, who unfortunately has had to leave the online session because he ran out of time. But he said the aim of the process is consensus, i.e. interactions between people to achieve an agreed outcome. I feel this proposal comes too close to introducing anonymous and invisible voting rather than achieving the desired workshopping of concepts between people. Also, it's not as though the number of participants is unmanageable or likely to become so.
Okay, so I have some thoughts on this, and although Adam says this has not been endorsed by the SIG chairs, it's certainly something we've had discussions about. One of the things that certainly I find difficult as chair is, you know, I look down this room and I see, I'm doing a quick head, you know, and I am doing a count this time, but the people who are eligible in this room to show consensus is actually really, really small. You know, if I could get all the RIR staff who wouldn't express an opinion to put their hands up, you know, all you people who work for an RIR, come on, you know who you are, right? Put your hands up, right? All those people who aren't going to take part in this process. Now, if you would all leave the room, I don't actually want you to do that, but no. But it leaves a very small number. And one of the problems I have as chair is to say, this represents the will of the community. You know, so Dean has said, oh, I want to be able to look people in the eye and so on. Dean and I know, have also had conversations about the aristocracy of the internet. You know, so are we here, the people who can afford to be here, are we going to exclude all those other people who, and many of them may not be in the slightest bit interested, but one of the things I would like to see us do is get to the point where we can actually at least offer them the possibility of taking part in this. And right now, as the chair, it's almost impossible for us, and certainly for me as the chair, to take any view from anyone else at this, you know, at the point here. I have some questions about what Adam has said in terms of being able to pre-vote. I think I would prefer to see this be a system where where the chairs would say, can we reach a decision and ask people to, express their opinions both here and outside. And if we then want to say, have more discussion, we would reset the counters to 0 and start again. And what I would like, to help me with this would be perhaps to see a pie chart which had green for consensus and red for not consensus. And if it was very green, it would help me an awful lot to actually make a decision here about where we've got to. So I don't see that, Narani raised the point that you like to be able to eyeball the people who didn't like what you were saying. They'll have been at the mic, I think. And if you want to, you can ask the chairs to say, can we do this and have a show of hands? It wouldn't be precluded. So we could do the hands, and then we would be able to look and say, now there's some discrepancy here. Everybody in the room thinks this is a great idea, and everybody remote thinks this is a terrible idea. Are you really going to tell me that their opinion isn't worth something? Because that's what you're saying is, if it's only the people in the room who put their hands up. So I would like Adam to think about this, and maybe you guys want to get him to think about this, is not have voting on the mailing list. If you want to express your opinion on the mailing list, express your opinion on the mailing list. Level playing field, everybody's in the same position. If you want then to help us at the meeting say, who's in favor, including those people who are remote, then we get a feel for it. It's a really hard job doing this decision on consensus, and sometimes it's not clear. And I would like us, perhaps as David suggested, to experiment with this and see where it goes. If we think people are gaming the system or it's screwing the system, we don't have to continue using it. But that would be my take. Let Masato have his.
You have a comment?
Andy's right, we have had conversations in the past about the aristocracy of the internet, and we are in complete agreement. My clarification to my earlier point is I want to look people in their virtual eye. I don't mind if I'm looking at them in the room, but I need to know who it is so I can engage in the sorts of conversations that Narani was mentioning earlier. So, you know, attributed, yeah, it needs to be attributed to someone. Otherwise, my APNIC consensus botnet will mean that I never lose a proposal again in my life.
And I think major point is a balance between anonymousness and availability. I think that's very important point. But I would like to emphasize that even though we will introduce electronic system, it's still one factor to consider consensus. Okay. Comment on the mailing list is very important to consider consensus, and also discussion in the session is also very important. So yeah, certainly if we will introduce such this system, maybe some people can express opposition without saying anything, but chair can consider that point also. Okay, there some opposition, but reason is not so clear, or you can find the reason in the discussion in the session or in the mailing list. So important point is we need to consider all factors. It is just one factor.
Narani from NetNote again. No, well, I agree with the comments that it's not only, of course, the people here. On the mailing list, that allows you actually to address, when people object, it allows you to address that there. So, of course, it's not just physically here, but when you have, I guess my concern is the bluntness of this tool. That policy or consensus is not just about yes, no, maybe. It is in those conversations that you make better policy. And I think we should definitely look at increasing remote participation in various forms. Some have been more successful than others in the past, and it's not the only solution. But my concern is the yes, no, maybe, because I don't think that necessarily it doesn't make good policy.
But we do that anyway, right? We do that physically with the show of hands. So I'm not getting your point here. I understand what you're saying about making good policy by workshopping it, but this is not replacing workshopping it. So I'm not kind of getting what you would...
Because we don't only do yes, no, maybe with the show of hands. First of all, if something is clearly controversial, the chair is not likely to say, okay, well, there were 2 more votes for than against. That means that we need to discuss further.
Now, let me stop you. We will not be seeing numbers. We'll perhaps be seeing percentages. We will not be seeing numbers. Now, we see numbers now. Let's not pretend any other way. We don't call it a vote, but we see numbers.
But there are 2 things that you get.
And what we get out of that is we get the ability to say we're there or we're not there. And by looking at the spread of people across here, I can, we can decide, and the room can decide, right? So, but we know when we've got there and when we're not there. And if we're not there, we continue. And I don't see that this would replace that. I don't see this would be a one-off thing if we were to do something like this to say, oh, well, we've over the 50%, let's go to lunch.
No, but I do think that when we show hands here, we do more than just vote yes, no, maybe. And it allows for people to you know, you look around the room and then you see, okay, well, we disagree, and that leads to other conversations. And I'm afraid that the system won't do that. It will just be a yes, no, maybe.
So would you be comfortable if we were to say, let's do this, and then if the chairs were seeing, well, there's clear agreement here, we would say, we can see that there's clear agreement. And if we weren't, we're saying, so can those people who didn't put their hands up, you know, we can do a combination. We don't have to do this or, we could do this and. But, you know, I can't see the hands of the people who are in their pajamas, as Adam described it. And I can't see the hands of the people who are in the chat room. And we might get some more. I'd be curious to know how many people actually did have in the chat room. You know, I think we may be arguing about a problem here that doesn't actually exist. You know, we may get 10 people remote who do use this thing, and it actually will have make very little difference. But I would love to be in a position to offer that opportunity to people remotely. You know, there are times when I wasn't able to get to these meetings, and taking part was impossible.
It's, I mean, like I said, I don't have any good solutions because I think it's very, it's hard to make good policy, it's hard to gauge consensus, it's hard to reach consensus sometimes. So I don't believe that there are simple solutions. And I think you need to look at a variety of solutions, and you need to have very wise chairs. or the two of you.
I have legal counsel in the room because they're, and I'm going to ask them a question because something occurs to me about what Dean said, that he wouldn't accept such a system if it allowed anonymous registration. And I suspect under the new Australian privacy laws, we're required to allow that. Would there be a way around that?
Put the website somewhere else.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Adam. The Australian privacy law requires us as an organisation to give people the opportunity, if possible in the circumstances, to act anonymously or under a pseudonym. But the key word there is in the circumstances, whether it's reasonable to do so. So I think within the context of seeking consensus, I think it is open for this community to say that, well, in the circumstances, it's not reasonable to extend anonymity, to make the anonymity available to you, because I want to know.
Great. Okay, thanks. I'm really surprised, just before you, because we'll probably wrap up, I'm really surprised at which things on this list offended people the most. They're not the ones that, not necessarily, some of them are the ones that I expected. I was really expecting people to require an audit trail. We've got a bot master in the front here that's keen to go. And I also expected people to be able to see, because there is a danger that the chairs up here look at the green screen that they're faced with after that and go, no, we haven't reached consensus. You'd have at least if we show the hands, you can look around the room and you can go, oh yeah, well, there's a lot of people are on side here. If you don't get to see the hands, these guys could make up anything, and I'm going to delete it straight after. So you're putting a lot of trust in the chairs. So I'm surprised, and you know, I mean, I'm deliberately kind of going out here. I certainly think voice your opinion before the SIG meeting was one of them, but I was expecting the audit trail to be an issue.
Dean Pemberton, Internet NZ. I trust the chairs, but the other thing is, I'm starting my objections from the input stage. So if we give the chairs bad information, then no amount of good good prerogative by the chairs will help. So I'm starting my objections with, let's get the information that the chairs are seeing in terms of, actual people, actually. Let's get that sorted. Then, once I've got that done, I'll start having a look at any other objections I might have. But for me, that's the starting point, is making sure that whatever the chairs are seeing in terms of, in the room, out of the room, pie chart, whatever, let's make sure that that's as accurate and representative as we can get it. So that's where I'm starting.
So, Dean, would you be content, or would you be more content if we were to get Adam to look at the system? Let's get a straw dog up there and actually use it at the next meeting and see whether it comes up or helps us come to a different conclusion than the one we would have reached had we gone by the traditional method. We could test it. We could see if people want to game the system. We can tell if people are gaming the system. If there's 40, if we know in total there's thousands of expressions of opinion, I don't use votes, right?
Yep.
Coming in, that somebody's gaming the system, and we'll go, now, let's go back to hands.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I think,
yeah,
I think there are safeguards in here, and I'd like, I don't know if David Conrad's still here, but David's comment about let's try this and see how it goes. I mean, really try it rather than just say.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm a firm believer in perfect is the enemy of done.
Yeah.
So let's get something out there. Let's try it. Let's assess it, evaluate it, see what it does. It's just let's be very open about the fact that this will be an iterative process and look at how it goes along the way. Not just go, right, well, we're going to try this and this will be binding and we won't. Yeah, so let's try it.
Yeah, I have one idea. I think we don't need this one. We don't make this one mandatory in initial few meetings, I think. So chair can use this system, or he or she can ask consensus by traditional way. Then I think that
It doesn't have to be an or, it can be an and. It could be both.
in some case, I think we don't need both.
No.
But in some case, we need in just some case we need both. So I mean, which one? Which one's which?
I'm just, my thinking here is that if we do this and show hands, we can validate the results. We can get to a point next time around where we look at this and say, this isn't giving us a big surprise.
I could potentially have a problem with what you're talking about, because if we don't make it mandatory and the chair gets up there and go, well, I'm not doing any electronic consensus gathering this time, and I'm sitting at home in my jammies, I'm going to be really upset. If we're going to do it, we have to say you will get an opportunity to use the system. Otherwise, I got up at 2 in the morning in Warsaw to participate, and I can't.
Adam, but we still have a chat. So, I mean, traditional way includes both of raising hand and also writing something on the chat, in chat room, right?
Okay. Oh, okay. I maybe have one more point I want to make before I finish, but okay. So, Adobe Connect, which is our webcasting tool, has such a mechanism built into it. Unfortunately, it's a proprietary system, and we can't change the fact that it's called voting. It costs nothing. We could probably turn it on right now and have a go at it, but the problem is it says voting and we can't change that.
Sunny Chandy from APNIC. Technically it doesn't say voting, but it will show a number. If you raise hand in Adobe Connect, it will show how many hands raised and it counts how many hands raised.
Okay.
But it's not if you're accessing it, you can see it, it says show of hand. It doesn't say voting.
And the results are public, yeah?
Yeah, everyone logged into it can see.
So my question is, do we just want to have a go at that for a meeting and see? Or, because I guess, so it gets back to the $5 or $5 million. If I put in a system that is laissez-faire like this, and then we say, no, but we need to add this and we need to add that, then it's a different thing. What I'm trying to do, I'm actually trying to get an idea of what the specification is for the system now so I can go out and buy one or build one. If I don't know, I can't do that. That's what's been happening for the last 2 years. I go, I don't really know what the community wants. I could turn on this Adobe Connect thing and they could all freak out. Or I could build one in the current CMS website, but it doesn't have this, it doesn't have that. And so my point is trying to get at least, I want to be on the done side rather than the perfect side, but I need to be there so I don't spend money on a solution that's not going to scale to what we require of it. You know, that's just my warning. I mean, I've had some very good input about where the pressure points are and what people's fears are. I think to some degree, the Secretariat needs to talk about how we feel about it. And as I said, I'll put this on the mailing list and further consult with the chairs. Yeah.
You said what I was going to say. So obviously, we'll close this off now, and if anybody's got any particular things they want to catch Adam and talk to him about, you know, outside this session, if you've been too shy to put your hand up, you know, then clearly he would appreciate that, I think. Yeah, and
I certainly would.
Yeah. So let's finish that up. I think it's been a useful discussion. It actually helps us focus a little bit too on what we mean by consensus and what we don't mean by consensus, and remote participation and helping external participants. So let's finish up there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah. So the next item on, well, in fact, the last item on our agenda is Proposal 109. Geoff's going to talk about that. Allocate two prefixes 1.0.0.0/24 and 1.1.1.0/24 to APNIC Labs as research prefixes.
Good afternoon all, I'm Geoff Huston, I'm with APNIC. As Andy said, this is a proposal on figuring out how to deal with two particular prefixes which constitute the balance of the prefixes that APNIC has been holding in quarantine for some time. The background is exactly the same background as Dean went through this morning. I can go through it unless you all have memories. You have memories, I'll move on. That's much the same apart from the last thing. We just don't have any way of mitigating the traffic coming to those two prefixes. Some subsequent work has shown that we get sustained bursts of up over a gig directed at 1110, and 1000 is in a very similar state. We can't give them out to anyone, they're just unusable. And equally, leaving them in quarantine just seems messy. So one way to actually provide a long-term approach is simply to say they're useful for one purpose. And the one purpose we've actually found it's been useful for is actually as a dark traffic attractor, because the amount of traffic that comes into this is actually illustrative of a number of issues. A, unintentional leaks around routing. These prefixes are used locally, but the routing is managed haphazardly. We can learn something about that, about local use. These prefixes are also indicative of the amount of hostile traffic that scans the entire internet. The profile of hostile traffic changes over time, and maybe it's something you might want to know about because all of you are subject to the same degree of scanning and hostility. There's very little actually written about it or even investigated in a systematic fashion. These prefixes do give us some insight into that. So the objective is to actually do a long-term allocation of those two /24s into APNIC Labs for research. Could have we just done this as a bookkeeping entry? Probably. Should we consult the community before we do it? I think so. That's why I'm here. In other regions, I don't know if anyone has also managed to get that much toxicity. I don't know about RIPES 5356778 that I saw someone using as documentation earlier in the week. I don't know, but as far as I can see, no one else has got quite the same kind of problem as we have with Network 1 and those low prefixes. The solution, as I said before, just simply it's an allocation direct into APNIC Labs as research prefixes. Our intent is to use them as passive data collectors in long-term traffic. We're not going to respond, because if we ever respond, we're going to generate a storm of traffic in response. So they're basically just passive collectors. We did that last experiment, or sorry, we're undergoing an active experiment that we started in 2013. It's been gathering data for 8 months now. It's getting into the high numbers of terabytes. The analysis is mind-boggling, but we are working on it. This has been a research collaboration with Google, but it's unlike normal Google stuff. The data is indeed available and works in an open sandbox, because they're doing it for us in response to an invitation in response to an express for help that George and I made on the NANOG list some time ago. So yes, this is an open collaboration. Advantage, well, it's always useful to understand what's happening in the net, and I'm sure you'd agree. And it might also be useful, this research analysis might help network operators out there understanding the way the internet is changing in terms of dark traffic. Disadvantages, I'm really not sure there are any. No one else has got a use for these prefixes, considering that they are such amazing toxicity magnets. Impact on APNIC, can't really see any. And then it's over to you. So the proposal is to basically do a long-term allocation of those 2 prefixes into APNIC to sort of straighten up what is a temporary quarantine measure that we're currently operating under at the moment. Mr. Chairs. Messrs. Chairs.
Messrs, yes. Any comments? Okay, I'm going to... Oh. So if you could press the little button on your website.
Someone's pressing buttons, it ain't me.
So this is Izumi from JPNIC. I generally support the idea behind it, and my understanding is that this project is for the good of the public internet and using the address space that we can't use anyways. But there are also a couple of things that I would like to understand in order to properly support this. So would the research results be publicly made available? Or
Well,
start with a simple question.
Yes, we published the results earlier of the first phase of work. We certainly intend to publish results from the second phase, but I am wading through data that's getting close to petabytes at this point. This takes a lot of time and effort, and there are a lot of other work. But yes, it is on the agenda to do publication of all of the research around this. Yes.
Okay, that's great to know. And if there's anybody else apart from Google who's interested to join the project, would that be possible?
Oh, certainly it's possible. There are very few folk in the world who will happily, under no preconditions or limitations at all, give us access to such an amazing amount of bandwidth and data. Google did that under no precondition. If anyone else wants to do the same without contract, without limitations and so on, we'll happily talk and chat and see what we can do.
Okay. And I understand that you've already published a report on how much traffic this address prefix attracts. So what this project would help, in addition to what you've done, is my understanding is that that would help you see more trend in from which part of the network, or what are any exact trend? Is there anything, what exactly is the additional thing that you might be able to work with this project?
We saw the last time a large number of SIP equipment doing rendezvous on that address. That is weird. We are not sure to what extent that address has been taken on by vendors in terms of rendezvous. We know there is local Wi-Fi, but we're only unsure to the extent to which that local Wi-Fi leaks. So again, we'd like to understand some of these issues, just to understand the broader issues of local scoped use leakage and the types of equipment that is leaking and why. And I think this is all useful stuff.
Yes, okay. Yes, I understand. And one last point. So, well, Google is, I'm sure they all mean well to help with the project, but they're also a private company. So it might include some sensitive data about who's using this address space. And is there a way to make sure that they just use this result for the purpose of this project instead of
Google operate under our terms and conditions of anonymity insofar as we don't disclose individual addresses. unless it happens to be an address that is commonly used by vendors out there pushing stuff in. In other words, if it talks about people and their use and its leakage, the ethics of this say, no, you're not going to see the individual address all the way down.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Azumi. Now, our set of questions, yeah. Is there anybody else who's got any comments to make on this? So can we put the slides up for the, I'm going to go straight to the, yeah, can we have the next one? Yeah. Well, we'll quickly go through this. So can we just go back one? Yeah, just quickly, yeah. So just to summarize so that we're all, this is the point where you stop reading your email and be awake and so on, yep. So Prop 109 allocates 1.0.0.0/24 and 1.1.1.0/24 to APNIC Labs as research prefixes. And the objective is there. The objective of this proposal is to allocate the, same thing. So what are the views? Who strongly supports this proposal? Okay, and who just supports this proposal? And is anybody neutral on this? Okay, and those who oppose this proposal? And strongly oppose this proposal? Okay, so I'm not seeing any negatives here. I'm not seeing anybody who's saying they think this is a really bad idea or anything like that. And so if we had that bit of script. Yes. Yes, the Craig statement.
He's not my mate anymore.
Oh. You. Okay, can you, okay. So the remote participants are also supportive of this either strongly or in a less strong way, but yeah, so we've got.
Actually, this is a problem why we want to introduce the electronic system. I just forget to check chaplain. That's my mistake. But it may happen.
The other problem for me is it's in 4-point font as well. But so this policy proposal has been discussed on the APNIC policy SIG mailing list and at today's open policy meeting. The APNIC PDP requires the community to reach consensus or a general agreement on the proposal before it can proceed. I've conferred with my co-chair, and we have noted the community's comments for and against adoption of this proposal. On consideration of these inputs, we believe that the community has reached a consensus on the proposal. The next step in the PDP is to take this proposal to the AMM and seek a continued consensus there, and we'll do that. The proposal will be posted back to the mailing list for a 4-week comment period, and if that period, if required, that period will be extended by extended up to 8 weeks. Okay, so
thank you.
I declare that.
I will go.
Experiment. Nearly. So that's all our agenda items for today, and that takes us to the end of our business. And now you really can go and do something else and don't have to come back until the next meeting. So see you all the next time. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your show of hands, and we'll see you soon. Thanks. I got one last thing. Has anybody seen my Kobo notebook? A little brown covered electronic notebook. I'd like it back.